Good morning. Thank you very much. And you got up early, so you'll get a little bit of controversy. So I think Tom's job was to try to lull you into complacency on coal supplies, and my job is to sort of do the opposite. So we'll see how that goes. I really appreciate this opportunity. Before you heard Tom's talk, let's start with a little wake-up exercise here. Before you heard Tom's talk, how many people had heard that the United States has like a 200 or a 250-year supply of coal? Raise your hand or nod your head. There you go. Thank you very much. How many of you had heard before Tom's talk that we were the Saudi Arabia of coal? Very good. Okay, now, how many of you before Tom's talk had taken much time to analyze what you had heard about coal supplies? That's very good. We're making progress. If I had asked that question about a year ago, not many people would have taken a very close look. So let's take a look. I'll intersect quite a bit with what Tom said, but hope to take you a little bit farther. I began this journey about 4 or 5 years ago looking at coal supplies because I was working on climate change. Coal is the largest source of CO2. I said I better figure out where the coal comes from. And as I dug deeper and deeper into this question, frankly, I sort of had my socks knocked off. And I came to be very concerned, for reasons that I'm going to explain to you, that our country has this unexamined assumption, for the most part. And we happen to be wrong. Now, we haven't been wrong about too much lately, but I'm concerned that we might be wrong about this. So let's take a look at that. The Energy Information Administration is the place where you might turn if you were thinking about coal supplies or anything related to energy. And what I want to do is help you understand why I believe that our entire country is basically misled on this issue. The Energy Information Administration publishes something, Tom discussed it, used the term reserves. They're termed estimated recoverable reserves, or ERR. You can find all of this on the Energy Information Administration website. You can look at Table 15 in the annual coal report, or you can look at kind of the classic triangle that EIA publishes. And visually, this just gives you the sense like, well, I guess I'm not going to worry about coal, you know, unless I'm worried about climate change or mercury or childhood asthma or any of the other things that come with burning coal. I'm just not going to worry about long-term coal supplies because look at the size of that triangle up there. And the number that most people refer to is this estimated recoverable reserves. Tom used the more recent figure. This triangle was published in 1997. And there, the estimated recoverable reserves is 275 billion tons. We use about 1 billion tons a year. 275 divided by 1 is 275. We used about 10 years, so around 260 now. I'm not going to worry. We have a lot of problems in this country. I'm not going to worry about coal reserves if that's what you look at. There's a number, though, that's published by the EIA that's much more important. Tom mentioned it, but and that's really shown as the tip of the triangle in this EIA triangle. And if you look at that number, which almost no one does, in 1997 they talked about 19 billion short tons, use about 1 billion tons a year. That's a number that I believe is much closer to the planning horizon that we have, and I'm going to explain to you why that is. I'm also going to explain to you why the EIA's use of estimated recoverable reserves is not what we thought it was. If you dig down far enough, this took me, frankly, almost 4 years to find this. If you dig down far enough, and all this information is available in this report that you can download from cleanenergyaction.org, feel free to contact me. This is my life now. I used to think about other things, but now all I think about is what I call a 4-letter word. So feel free to call me if you want to talk about the 4-letter word also. So if you drill down far enough into the EIA web pages, you'll find a statement. It starts on line 7 at the URL that's shown there, and it says, the usual understanding of the term reserves. Reserves are usually supposed to have been estimated for economic recoverability. So they say in the usual understanding of the term reserves as referring to quantities that can be recovered at a sustainable profit cannot technically be extended to EIA's estimated recoverable reserves because economic and engineering data to project mining and development costs and coal resource market values aren't available. So never mind, we're the Energy Information Administration. We're going to call it reserves. Reserves usually means we think it can be recovered at a reasonable profit. It's not just, you know, very difficult to access. We're going to call them reserves. but they're not reserves. And it's this that's really at the source of our country's misunderstanding. It's why I spent, frankly, a lot of money and a lot of time to come out here to speak to you. I'll be spending the next few days in Michigan and Ohio, and happy to meet with anybody. I've got some extra time, so if there's other people you'd like me to talk to. Because this, frankly, this is, you know, whether you believe Madoff or weapons of mass destruction or whatever it is, this is the fundamental source of our misunderstanding in this country. Let's take a look at where the coal comes from. One way to do this is to look at something called the Ventyx Diagram. For the listeners, you can download this diagram again from cleanenergyaction.org. Color, these are dots showing power plants. Color of the dot tells you where they're coming from. Eastern coal plants typically are still using eastern coal. There are some western coal plants using western coal. Some coal plants in Illinois and Indiana that use Illinois and Indiana coal. But a growing number, and about over 40% of our country's coal, is coming from the Powder River Basin in northeastern Wyoming. On this particular diagram, the Ventyx diagram, you can see the red dots. If we were to have looked at this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there would have been about half as much red. We're relying increasingly on western coal. In this case, Powder River Basin coal is sub-bituminous, lower quality coal. We can look at, for example, the top 6 states. We can see that Wyoming dwarfs all the other top producing states. Wyoming's about 3 times as large as West Virginia. I did an analysis looking back at the EIA data, and every state is past peak in coal production except for Wyoming and Montana. Wyoming are these big surface mines. I refer to it as fast-release coal. It's kind of like fast-release carbohydrates. Eating donuts for breakfast powers you up really good, and about 2 hours later, you're dead on the floor. So it's very serious to be looking at what we're going on in Wyoming. And again, on a time lapse, if we could have done a time lapse, it would take a lot of time to do that analysis, but we would see that 20 years ago, we used about half as much coal from Wyoming. So as we fast forward, I kind of think about it as the march of the red dots across our country. And I already know this data that you're looking at is from 2005. I already know of some coal plants that have converted from the color they are to red. So if you were to update this, you would see sort of the increasing reliance on Wyoming coal shown as red in this diagram. The vision of Western coal comes from, this is a picture that's on the Peabody website. I like to remind people that pictures are forever, pretty much. So this picture is still on the Peabody website, coal website. Whether that coal is still there or not, I can't tell you, but I can tell you that we're depleting the Western coal to the tune of over 50 train loads of coal a day. So the chances that the coal that was there yesterday that are still there is still not there. Most of that coal has been put onto trains, shipped across the country, and turned into CO2. Pictures are forever. Coal's a depletable resource. You can think about these mines out in the Powder River Basin. I'm showing an aerial view of this, kind of the smaller ones, including one that supports our coal plants in Colorado, the Eagle Butte mine. There are, as it's kind of interesting, there's only 13 mines in the Powder River Basin, so you can become an expert on the Powder River Basin coal mines quite quickly. It's, again, in the report, and it all has the references that you can turn to. There are 13 mines. They're spread out in a north-south line along the eastern edge of the Powder River Basin. They kind of range from small north of Gillette to medium south of Gillette to large down in what's called the Wright area, about 20, 30 miles south of Gillette, where you find things like the Black Thunder mine, one of the top 2 mines in this country, one of the biggest mines in the world, just has recently combined with the Jacobs Ranch to make it undeniably the top coal mine, the largest coal mine in our country. We'll be talking quite a bit about the Black Thunder as we go. Let's start with a little bit of an introduction to the geology of the Powder River Basin. The thing to remember is that it's a basin. It's like a bowl. The coal was laid down about 55 or 60 million years ago. That's relatively recent. Eastern coal was laid down 200, 300 million years ago. And it is a bowl. The existing mines are on the eastern edge, and they are over on the side of the bowl where the coal was reasonably accessible. You can see on this, if you were to look at this diagram, you can see these kind of little indents. Those are the existing mines. We started ramping up those coal mines in the 80s in order to keep our country going. As they expand from east to west, going across the sides, they'll be going down the sides of the bowl. And the colors in this particular diagram talk to you about the overburden on the coal. Over here you had about 100, on the eastern edge of the Powder River Basin, you had about 100 feet of overburden. As the mines expand, you go to 200, 300, 400, 500 feet of overburden. When you get down to the bottom of the bowl, you've got over 1,000 feet of overburden. If we really could access all that coal, we probably would have 200 years of coal in this country. But as the USGS has looked at this and looked at the stripping ratio, how many tons of dirt you have to move to get to a ton of coal, as they've done that, they've realized that the vast majority of the coal in the Powder River Basin, on these particular diagrams, which are in the coal report, you'll see it as a blue hatch. You can see that most of this coal will not be surface accessible. Over 70% of the coal in the Powder River Basin isn't surface accessible. In theory, we could probably do a little underground gasification. You could try to do some underground mining. That's going to be very difficult in the Powder River Basin because it's like a sandbox. It's not like going into a mountain. Our children and our grandchildren may try to dig down and pull up a little bit, but my guess is they'll be looking up for their energy source, not looking down. Underground gasification is certainly a doable technology, but it's likely to be difficult to do at the scale and at a cost that matters. And so let's take a look at what the USGS has looked at. You start with this original resource, and then you try to figure out how much is remaining. Of that remaining, how much is available. Of the available, how much is recoverable. And then how much is economically recoverable. This, in 2002, when the USGS did this and they looked at the Wyoming coal, they found that about 17% of the coal was economically recoverable. And when I read that report, frankly, I was so happy because I said, oh man, we're going to fry the planet, but we're going to fry it to a deep crisp. And so I basically pushed my books aside and went for a hike in the woods, had a great day. This news made me very excited. Fast forward about 6 years, 2008, the USGS took another look, and we're going to compare these two studies. But when we got down to the economically recoverable coal in 2008, instead of being 17% economically recoverable, they talked about 6% being economically recoverable. And it's at that point, frankly, that my stomach sort of turned into a knot and hasn't really unknotted since then because I'm so concerned. And there's more reasons than that. When you compare the two studies, the two USGS studies, red is 2008, blue is 2002. We'll walk this through for the listening audience. In 2008, the USGS began with more coal, found that there was more remaining. By the time they looked at available, 2008 available coal was a lot less than 2002, recoverable the same. And again, by the time you get down to economically recoverable, this is in billions of short tons. 2002 was 23 billion short tons. 2008, it was about 10 billion short tons. Economically recoverable, we're going to examine that concept here just in a few more minutes. But what we're learning is that the more you look at the coal in the Powder River Basin, which is supposed to be sort of our Fort Knox of coal, the less there is. And if I had a couple hours, I would explain that to you for many of the mines that are up there. One way to think about it is that the coal was laid down 55 or 60 million years ago. When we didn't have as many data points, you might think that the coal here and the coal here was both going to be 80 feet thick. But as you get more data points, as you do coal bed methane, all of a sudden you realize that maybe your old data points were on the two banks of a stream. And 55 million years ago, a stream went through there and wiped out all the coal between your former two data points. So that's one of the reasons why, as the price of coal was increasing dramatically, the amount of economically recoverable coal examined in the Powder River Basin has gone down dramatically. One thing that people don't know is that the federal government owns most of the coal in the Powder River Basin, and throughout the western United States, they think Peabody or Archer Foundation or Alpha Natural own it. That's not true at all. The vast majority is owned by the federal government, typically shown as red in these USGS diagrams. The blue are school sections that were donated to the states, so that kind of gets wrapped up in the leasing process. To make a long story short, if you take the time look at the environmental impact statements that are being prepared for the expansions of these coal mines. In Colorado, the coal supply guy for Xcel Energy, the big utility in Colorado, just 10 days ago, he said, oh, the expansion plans are confidential, which is completely not true. They're completely out in the open because it's federally owned coal. You do have to look up the environmental impact statements. All the references are in the Coal Cheap and Abundant report. When you look at the lifespan of the existing mines in the Powder River Basin, the vast majority of them, if they get some expansions that they're in for presently, and that's actually a very big question, if they get those expansions, they'll get, for the most part, about 20 years. There's some small mines that are claiming more than 20 years. I don't think those, I doubt that that's going to hold up, but even so, they're like a, 10 or 15 million tons a year, which is not going to keep our country going very far. I want to talk just briefly a little bit, and this is the level that I hope that you all will ask your utility to go down to. Ask your utilities, where are you getting your coal? Don't let them just say, oh, Wyoming, it's the Saudi Arabia coal, Fort Knox, don't worry, there's only 13 mines out there. If they tell you the mine, call me, I can talk you through what it is. Let's just take a quick look at the Black Thunder mine, the largest coal mine in the country and probably in the world as far as I can tell. The Black Thunder mine has less than 10 years, has about 7 years left on the east side of the Joint Line Railroad that goes through there. If they hop over, they'll have to leave sort of a reserve barrier, what's it called, protection margin. And then they'll be expanding into something called the West Highlight. You can't dig a hole with straight sides, so they'll have to be kind of terrace it down. If they do all that, start a new pit, double the amount of overburden from about 200 plus feet of overburden to over 400 feet of overburden. That all costs money. If you looked at Tom's slides, you'll realize that coal costs in Michigan went up about 10% between 07 and 08, from about $1.73 a million BTU to $1.98 a million BTU. As you move more dirt, your costs go up more. And so if they do all of that, if the Black Thunder jumps over the Joint Line, starts a whole new pit, gets a whole new drag line, spends, many, many millions of dollars to do that, that'll give them 7 years of expansion. That's what's included in the 20 years. Then after that, you have to keep going, moving farther to the west, increasing the overburden. Let's take a quick look at this, which Tom also showed you. It's the cost curve for the Powder River Basin. Here's the 77 billion tons. That includes all coal up to a stripping ratio of 10 to 1. The chances that we'll be mining coal, moving 10 tons of dirt to get to 1 ton of coal, I think are vanishingly small. And if we do, the costs are going to go up monumentally. Here in this graph, they show the cost is going from about $10 a ton up to $60 a ton, so it'll increase by a factor of 6. But this doesn't consider a lot of things. One it doesn't consider is that as the price of coal goes up, the cost of extracting the coal goes up because you got to use a lot of coal-based electricity to run the big drag lines that dig up the coal. Doesn't consider very well the increased costs of reclamation. And it assumes that coal is like widgets, pay more, you can make more. And that's not the case at all. You've got to come out of coal mines. You can see the inflection point as you get to about a 5 to 1 stripping ratio. And then just 2 minutes, thank you, that's perfect. I want to talk you briefly through why it's so important to do what I call a mine-specific analysis. Please, don't let your utility tell you it's all fine, because chances are it isn't. And this is a cliff that will make all the other cliffs that our country has driven over, frankly, look like child's play. Because most of what's keeping these lights and the PowerPoint projector and everything, computers and everything else going is coal. And no amount of wishful thinking can make the coal show up. So you've got to make sure that you look at the data that's available. As Americans, we have got to quit going along blithely and complacently assuming that it's all going to be fine because we're Americans. It should be obvious to most of us that that's not the case anymore, but this is the biggest of them all, because if the lights go out in this country, and they won't go out, but you will start to have these coal supply constraints that we're beginning to see in Colorado already. We're one state away from Wyoming. Our coal production, you can see, it appears that it peaked in 2004. You never know. It's possible that it'll expand greatly, and so that this was an apparent peak. But at least at this point, we've lost about 17% of our production over the last 4 years. That's a very significant percentage. And as I sat in my basement writing the coal supply report a year ago, I said, should I say that the coal's just not going to start showing up in the 2020 time frame? And I thought, no, Les, you just cannot say that. You know, they're going to find a way to make the coal show up. Well, as it turns out, as I sat about a mile from the Boulder, Colorado coal plant debating whether to say the coal wouldn't show up, guess what was happening? The coal was not showing up at the Boulder, Colorado coal plant. It went offline for 4 months as they lost their Colorado coal supply because there were 4 Colorado mines that declared force majeure at the same time. When things get old, they start to, you know, whether it's your body or your car, your refrigerator, whatever it is, or your coal mines, stuff happens, right? It's your, you know, what they say in Newfoundland, it's your ass, your elbow. You know, there's always something going on at a coal mine. And my mom comes from Newfoundland, so. These are the key questions you need to ask. Where does your coal come from? What mines are relied on? What geologic, economic, legal, and transportation constraints are going to face that future expansion? What are the cost issues? Please do not take this for granted, and please call me if they give you an answer that you question, because frankly, the utilities are still kind of flying blind on this. And I want to thank you so much for your time. Appreciate your attention.